Hello and welcome to L2R. I'm Kinaesthesia, and today I'll be going over the strategy for Valiona and Theralion on the heroic difficulty. This is widely regarded as one of the most difficult fights of the tier, and while it has been nerfed a bit, it certainly still requires a high degree of execution. These two dragons are so talented, they can fight you while they argue with each other. Just imagine how much trouble you would have if they actually focused on just killing you. On Heroic mode, Valiona and Theralion will test your raid's execution and healing. The fight has quite a bit of movement combined with moments of intense raid damage. Valiona and Theralion share a health pool of around 164 million and have a 10-minute hardened rage. Throughout the fight, Twilight Sentries will spawn in the Twilight Realm. These mobs have around 300,000 health each. You'll want to bring 2 tanks, 6 to 8 healers, and a balanced DPS makeup. Classes that can double dots such as Shadow Priests, Balance Druids, and Affliction Warlocks can be advantageous, but are not entirely necessary. This guide assumes that you have done the fight on normal mode, and as such are familiar with the normal mode mechanics. For more in-depth information on the fight as a whole, please refer to the normal mode strategy guide. During phases 1 and 2, Valiona and Theralion will retain all of the abilities they had on normal mode. It is important to point out that everything will do significantly more damage, so Blackout and Meteor may require a larger stack than your raid is accustomed to. The most significant difference throughout the encounter will be the adds that spawn in the Twilight Realm. Every few seconds, throughout the entire fight, a Twilight Sentry will spawn in the Twilight Realm and begin to pelt random raid members with Rift Blast. These single target bolts deal around 25,000 shadow damage. Being hit by different abilities throughout the fight will allow raid members to transport to the Twilight Realm to handle these mobs. Within the Twilight Realm, players will also find floating purple spheres that explode for large AoE shadow damage upon being touched. Let's look at how to handle the familiar mechanics while tackling the new ones. During phase 1, while Valiona is on the ground, the fight can be handled just as normal mode is. The raid will want to remain spread out around the dragon and will need to occasionally stack up in melee for Blackout. Once Blackout has gone off, spread back out to quickly minimize raid damage. Devouring Flames will be cast during this phase, so be sure to move out from in front of Valiona. Remember that Devouring Flames deals less damage the further you are from the boss, so players who are already distant can simply run further away. Shortly after the second Blackout, Theralion will begin to cast Dazzling Destruction. The spell is important because players hit by it will be teleported to the Twilight Realm to deal with the Twilight Sentries. We'll explain this more in depth in a moment. During phase 2, while Theralion is on the ground, the fight will continue just as it does on normal mode. Players with Meteor will still need to stack in melee, while players with Engulfing Magic will need to stay away from other players. Range should stay spread out around the boss, but must be ready to move reactively for Meteor, Engulfing Magic, or Fabulous Flames. Before transitioning back to phase 1, Valiona will cast 3 Deep Breaths across the room. The raid should move together to avoid these, but players who are hit will be taken to the Twilight Realm. Finally, there is a third way to enter the Twilight Realm. Tanks will occasionally be hit with Twilight Slash, giving them the Twilight Shift debuff. When this 1-minute debuff stacks to 5, it will turn into Shifting Reality, dealing around 15,000 shadow damage to all players close to the tank and transporting them to the Twilight Realm. Your raid will need to utilize the multiple phase shifting abilities to kill the Twilight Sentries while dealing with the rest of the fight as normal. In this sense, the fight becomes a bit of a balancing act. Begin by deciding which players will be going into the Twilight Realm. Try not to favor any specific class, instead rely on your strongest and most raid-aware players. Next, decide when they will be going into the Twilight Realm. We send players down during the first Dazzling Destruction, the first tank teleport during phase 2, and the first tank teleport at the start of the next phase 1. Choose 5 players to start, 4 DPS and 1 healer, and adjust the numbers to suit your raid once you've done some attempts. The key is to kill as many Twilight Sentries as possible each time the group shifts realm. Keeping the sentries down will significantly reduce raid damage and help the raid continue longer. The rest of the raid will need to become comfortable with basically 20 manning the fight, which can make stacking more difficult, but spreading quite easy. Players in the Twilight Realm must remember to avoid the bombs floating around and leave themselves enough time to find a portal back to the normal realm. Raid cooldowns such as Aura Mastery or Tranquility will need to be used reactively throughout the fight to battle out of tight situations. Alternatively, your raid can set a point at which no more ports will be taken and the fight can just be zerged down. For example, at 20% your raid can decide not to shift into the Twilight Realm anymore and sustain the raid using a Tranquility and Hymn rotation until the boss dies. Remember that there is no singular set way to do this rotation. What we laid out here is a basic setup that may work for you or may need building upon. Your raid may want to send 10 players down halfway through the fight instead of sending 5 players down 4 times. You'll need to do attempts and tweak the numbers to find what is best for your raid. Always keep in mind that everything up top works just as it does on normal mode. Once you figure out a successful method for dealing with the Twilight Realm, the fight becomes about getting one smooth attempt and working out a few kinks. Thanks for checking us out here at Learn to Raid. We hope this guide was helpful, and we'll see you at the next boss.
I wasn't feeling so good. I just didn't feel like playing anymore. So I went home, and I got all comfy and cozy and all scrunched up in front of my phonograph. And I sat there and I closed my eyes and listened to all the sweet